What happened on this tragic day, the 11th of September 2001? This is the day the so-called terrorist attack took down the Twin Towers, Building 7, and put a hole in the Pentagon. In this video, I'll be going through the facts and showing why this conspiracy theory exists that terrorists had nothing to do with this tragic event. Strap yourselves in and let's get ready to learn. The Pentagon was supposed to have been hit by a plane as well earlier that day, but no plane parts were found. Also, all the cameras surrounding the Pentagon, which should have picked up all the footage, were removed early that day or the night previous, which again, a little bit of suspicion why one of the most secure areas in America that had no CCTV. Also, where the Pentagon was hit, that was the exact spot that early that year it had been reinforced for an incident just like a plane hit or a bomb. That was the only section of the Pentagon which was reinforced. Furthermore, all the generals and high-ups in the Pentagon were in the other side of it and not in the re-secured area, which again, a little bit of suspicion that way. And the way the Pentagon was hit, the plane would have had to come from the other side, flown over the Pentagon, done a U-turn to go around and hit it, which many professional pilots have said in a plane of the size that was supposed to have hit the Pentagon would have more or less been impossible to do. All this added up shows that the Pentagon may not have been hit by a plane, but which experts believe was hit by a missile or an already planted bomb. That, with the fact the CCTV cameras were removed, the plane had to have done a U-turn over the building, and experts say the planes would not have been able to do that, all points to the fact that maybe it's a cover-up. The Pentagon aspect of it itself really doesn't look good. Practice hijackings were going on that day. Call centres were set up to make phone calls to people and pretend they were on a hijacked plane. They were told the people who were phoning were also in on it and they would, go along with the plan. It's led to believe that the people they phoned were the loved ones of who was on the plane, which would explain why a lot of the people who received phone calls from their so-called friends and family on the planes said they didn't sound like them, they were way too calm to have been on a hijacked plane, or mobile numbers were coming through. It's led to believe the call centre sometimes used mobile phones to make the phone calls, which I guarantee you they probably weren't told to have. The reason that is, mobile phone signals will not have been able to be received on the plane, so mobile phones could not have made the calls. The two planes hit the Twin Towers. One of them did have phones in the back of the plane, so yes, phone calls could have been made, but the second plane, that model of plane, had all the phones in the planes removed the year prior, so phone calls were impossible to be made from the second plane. And to add a little bit more mystery to it, one of the phone calls went on 9 minutes after the planes hit the building, meaning once again it was impossible for most of the phone calls to have taken place, if not all of them. And it's not just the phone calls that were suspicious. Eventually, military planes were scrambled to go and deal with the situation. The military base, a couple of miles down the road, should have and could have easily been used to get the planes from, but no, they used one that was a lot further away. Not just that, but the military planes were sent out to sea for a couple of miles before being told to turn around and head back the way they've come, which obviously by the time they turned around and got back, the incident had happened. To which obviously the question is asked, well, why did the military planes get scrambled from a further away base? Why did they go the wrong way? Now, obviously, conspiracy theory says that it's the government that set this whole thing up, planned 9/11 to ready to go into war. And it makes perfect sense. They set up a fake scenario. They set this up so everyone thinks, okay, cool, we're just doing a practice. People are phoning up the numbers they've been given, everything's going smooth. They think they're just being involved in a practice, when really they're part of this brilliant plan. And with all these fake scenarios going on, it took the military quite a long time to realise that these hijackings weren't fake and these two planes were heading for the Twin Towers. Because obviously, when the military have said when they first saw the planes heading there and first found everything, that their initial thoughts was it's part of the practice. But unfortunately, it wasn't. It was a real incident, and they just didn't know about it. All of this combined once again points to the fact that maybe it wasn't real hijackings. The fake phone calls, the fake scenarios, the practice planes, the planes flying too far away. Once again, it just looks very, very suspicious, just like the Pentagon, and it really does make you think what actually happened on this day. As I say, a lot of the phone calls have been proven to be fake. The planes were just sent the wrong direction. It was a very, very unfortunate thing that happened, but was it planned by the American government? So far, the evidence is pointing to yes, but there's plenty more to look at and delve deep into, and that's what we'll do right now. Let's get on to what happened when the planes actually hit the building. Unfortunately, 2 planes did hit the building. That is real. And unfortunately, these 2 buildings did come down and kill thousands of people. Unfortunately, that did happen. Which I think, if this is, which I do believe it is to be a conspiracy, personally for me, it makes it sad that the people actually the government planned to kill their own people just to go into a war. So when the planes hit the buildings, what allegedly happened is the planes hit the buildings, the planes then melted, which melted the steel beams which brought the buildings down. Now, there's a lot of flaws in this. One, that the plane parts couldn't have burnt and heated up to the temperature needed to melt the steel. Mythbusters, in fact, and a few others have proven that the planes could not have melted the steel beams. So straight away, that's out the scenario. The actual buildings themselves shouldn't have come down the way they were constructed and built, with the concrete column as well, that these planes would have hit where they did and the buildings would not have come down. There would have been quite a lot of fires in the offices and around the areas that the planes hit, yes, but the buildings would not have come down the way they were constructed. That's just fact. Also, the plane parts that were recovered was taken away, scrapped and sent off to China straight away. Now, the reason that has happened, the American government said it's a very touchy subject and we don't want these parts being around, to be used or stolen or whatever. But the fact they were just taken away and scrapped straight away, again, it doesn't look good. Experts trying to examine the plane parts had to go to a scrap heap, run onto the scrap, try to sift through the debris, find a plane part as the claws were coming down and collecting them. And the reason I feel, and a lot of people do feel, that this happened is because every single plane part has a serial number. And with every plane, there's a black book. And say you find a plane part, say it's a sheet of metal, middle of the plane, serial number 7756. You look at the black book that this plane has, you look at it, you look in there, 776, whatever the number is, right? The numbers will match up to the black book. And it's led to believe the 2 planes that hit the building weren't the actual 2 planes that took off. They were fake remote-controlled planes. We'll get onto that in a few seconds, which would be why the government wouldn't want experts looking at the serial numbers, as they wouldn't match up and there'd be a big hole in the plot. Let's go into remote-controlled plane parts. A lot of the pilots have said the way the planes were flown to the buildings would have been very difficult. And once again, as the plane parts weren't examined, there's no proof that the 2 planes that hit the building were the alleged planes that took off. A lot of people do believe that the remote control planes that actually flew into the buildings are not actual planes that were hijacked. They're actual real size planes, actual real passenger planes, just remote controlled. So to round off the actual planes hitting the building, the planes that hit the building cannot be matched up with the planes that took off from the airports. The fuel and actual planes itself couldn't have burnt and melted the steel structure of the building, so that shouldn't have collapsed. And obviously the black book, before people think, well, hang on, shouldn't the black book have burnt up as well? The black book is kept at the airports and different places, so no, the planes definitely could have been matched up. So if you put all of that together, and you chuck in the Pentagon, and you chuck in the fake phone calls, it's not looking good. The Pentagon looks fake, the phone calls and scenario looks fake, the planes look fake, the fact that the way they say the building came down in the melted area, again, looks fake. So far, all the parts we've looked at look fake. And trust me, there's still plenty more to look at. And it doesn't look any better, because it all still looks extremely fake. I don't want people to get upset. When I'm saying fake, I don't mean, the buildings coming down were fake. I mean, what the government said looks fake. So with the buildings come down, as you can see in the images now, they came down like a demolition. Layer on top of layer on top of layer on top of layer. Straight down in a flat pack. Where the government said they toppled down, which as you can see by the pictures, it didn't topple. It came down like a demolition. Which if what the government said happened, that's not how they'd come down. They would have toppled down, not like a flat pack. And also, the way the buildings have come down do look like a demolition, which leads me on to another point of the fact that a lot of people around the area said they heard explosions just before the buildings come down, and it's led to believe the government planted explosives along the steel structures to bring the buildings down, which would explain why men in black suits were spotted around there in the prior weeks. Also, why some of the steel beams were cut in half with a perfect cut. which an explosion would have done, but the building collapsing would not. As I've said, the way the planes hit the buildings would not have been enough to bring them down, which is why the explosives would have been used to actually bring down the buildings. The evidence points to that happening, as I said. The steel beams look like an explosion went through them. People say they heard the explosions, and the way the building came down was as if it was an explosion, a demolition. So once again, if you add the way it comes down, the fact the planes couldn't have brought it down by hitting them, the Pentagon, the way that was hit, the phone calls that were faked, the scenarios that were faked, the planes being sent away, once again, another bit of evidence that looks like the government's explanation is fake. Because both buildings came down in the exact same way, and demolition experts who've been doing it for years and years have said that that's exactly what a demolition would look like. So once again, it doesn't look like what the government said is anywhere near the truth. And once again, the conspiracy could be very true. Moving on to building 7, as you can see the pictures there, you've got 1, 2, 7 over there. Now the reason 7 came down apparently was it was engulfed in flames and it came down, which the structure of the building, it would not have came down if it was engulfed in flames. Just like if you look at Grenfell Tower, the building that got caught on fire in England, in London, that was absolutely engulfed in flames, burnt to a crisp. Unfortunately, many people lost their lives again, but the building stayed standing. Now, Building 7 apparently came down because of flames, which it couldn't have, but once again, apparently, it looks more like it was a controlled demolition, / it was brought down. The owner of the building had just taken out a nice insurance policy on it, so it was quite convenient for him to bring the building down. And apparently, he said to the fire brigade, bring it down, which the fire brigade would not have been able to have done that. It would have needed a demolition crew. But no one's actually know whether that conversation happened or not, so we don't know for sure. But in the initial report of the incident, Building 7 was not mentioned. So the government did not include Building 7 in the initial report of the terrorist attack. And when the news was reporting Building 7 collapsed, you could still see it standing in the background. The news reporter was saying, another building has came down, Building 7 has collapsed, and Building 7 was still standing in the background, and it came down a couple of hours later. So again, whether it was just a mistake on their part or what, but once again, it does look like a cover-up, as there's no way Building 7 would have come down with the flames, and there's no way a fire crew could have brought down Building 7. So once again, another massive hole. Now moving on to the fire crews. The firemen that went into the Twin Towers and went up there, and the radio conversations that they had back down with the superiors on the ground were very, very disturbing. They were telling the superiors on the floor that the fires were contained within a section of the Twin Towers, within a section of the buildings where the plane had hit, and there was a lot of office fires and stuff like that. But they were reporting that it wasn't that bad and the fires could be put out. Moments later, on the radios, you could hear explosions, and some of the firemen themselves radioed down, said, we just heard what we think are explosions. And moments later, the buildings collapsed. Now, I was going to play that audio here, but it's very disturbing, and I'm not going to do that. But you can hear the explosions in the background. You can hear them say, I think we just heard explosions. Something exploded, and within seconds, the buildings collapsed, which puts evidence towards the fact that where people say it was a controlled demolition and there's explosives planted inside the buildings. So when you take into consideration everything we spoke about, the Pentagon, the fact the cameras were gone, the plane came in from a different angle, there was no plane parts, the fake phone calls that were going on, the practice hijackings that were going on, the fact the planes got sent miles away before told to come back, the fact they saw planes from a different area, the fact that when the planes hit the buildings, they couldn't have melted the steel structure to bring the buildings down, the fact the buildings came down in a demolition way, the fact that people heard explosions, the fact that Building 7 came down on its own with no records of it being hit by anything. All of the evidence suggests that the conspiracy theory of the US government, Bush himself, bringing down the buildings to go into war looks very, very plausible. And Building 7, I mean, that's basically come down. It looks like an insurance thing, but we don't know. There's a grey area around that. But the Twin Towers and the Pentagon, the planes that hit them, it doesn't look like what they said. And what happened to the people in the actual planes that took off from the airports? I mean, unfortunately, it's kind of obvious, isn't it, really? A lot of people speculate that the planes landed at a military base, the people taken off the planes and unfortunately killed. I mean, you couldn't have people walking around that were on the planes that hit the buildings. So with all the evidence so far, for me, yes, there is a conspiracy. I believe the government set it all up, made it all happen to go into war. And there's too much evidence. I mean, every aspect of it, there's stuff that doesn't look right. The Pentagon, you look at it and go, things aren't right. The buildings that collapsed, how buildings collapsed. Every aspect of that day is questionable pretty much. The only thing you can say for certain is 2 planes hit the Twin Towers and they came down and killed thousands of people. That's the only thing for certain. Everything else is still up for debate. And that's unfortunate, but it is still up for debate. Many people like me believe that the conspiracy is correct and the government did it. Many people still believe it was a real hijacking. Obviously, I've given you the evidence, told you exactly what happened on the day, told you all the evidence we've had, told you the experts' opinions. It's up to you. Make up your own mind. Maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't. Let me know in the comments exactly what you think happened that day. Because, you know, as I say, it's still up for debate. There's no concrete evidence either way. But all of the facts and all the evidence we do know and all of the things that can be proven don't look like a hijacking. So let me know in the comments what you think, if you agree or if you don't. And if you've made it this far in the video, leave a like, leave a comment of what you think happened and anything else you want me to do in the future. And please make sure you subscribe. Let's be honest, you haven't made it this far in the video, and if you have, you might as well subscribe. I mean, if you sat through nearly 17 minutes of this, you might as well subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon with more conspiracies.